someone always has to be the last speaker before the end of an event and the real festivities. But in short, I will give the whole set of presentations that you heard this afternoon again, right? Because it's been a long and very productive afternoon that has started with the overview given by Celia on CCU is an integrated element of what the IPCC report's response is to how we deal with all the challenges to meet the 1.5 degree scenario. And so the range of opportunities that are open up. And then we dove into details that looked at what are actually the opportunities and the risks of various product categories, various technology systems, where Deepak first gave us a sense of what the chemical industry's potential is. What kind of products can be made? How is this all being a part of a strategy to get products that we have enjoyed using and continue to need? So it really is a situation where a lot of potential exists, but very few opportunities are actually in place. Right? So we have answers, but they need to actually be materialized. And that became very, very clear in Jan's talk about energy systems and the relevance of CCU in those. We do, of course, have a well-established infrastructure for energy management, use, distribution, etc. How if we now replace the origin of some of the key feedstocks, let's say methane, with methane produced through CCU or hydrogen? A lot of implications. How do we handle transportation needs? How do we scale up? Let's not forget, it's 2022. There is not much time left to actually get all of that done. So that is really, really critical. And then in a moment of despair that I felt like, oh yeah, we have a lot of stuff to do, Paula came on stage and said, well, in the building sector, it actually looks quite different. There's a lot of stuff actually happening that is at technology readiness level 9, meaning it's on the market and ready for use. But of course, if we look at it closely, still a good handful of players that are in that space to materialize the gigaton potential that we have and the use case that we need to have. There's a lot of opportunity to accelerate. And there we take advantage of the fact that construction materials are produced in a distributed manner. So we can be really smart about how we harvest CO2, waste products, put them together and make useful elements. And I think Angela's presentation then showed us in very nice detail that while we know a lot about the chemistries, it actually is really complex to make this all work. And there's a lot of need for a very careful planning that we need to go through to decide what makes sense at what time and at what scale. How do we source the carbon that we need? Is it from CO2 or is it from CO2 harvested by plants and then converted into chemicals? There are a lot of system level questions. All of these are big system level questions. And then we heard a great introduction for all those of us who have not been thinking carefully about, well, how do we actually measure the CO2 footprint of all these products? And how do we properly account so that especially decision makers know, should I engage in CCU or not? When does it make sense? Because let's face it, just because we use CO2 doesn't make it environmentally good. In fact, we can make things much worse. So that is especially interesting and important as we look at how do we actually make these solutions palatable, not only to investors, industry, and politicians, but to societies at large. And we heard from Katrin in how important it is to continuously monitor and engage with society to inform what CCU actually is, what it can and cannot do. And as a result, we have heard this afternoon about many aspects. I think we can be encouraged that the potential of CO₂ utilization to help mitigate climate change effects is huge. But there are also a lot of things that we have not yet in place. And those include what does the everyday consumer make about it? Does it make a difference if the CO₂ in my beer comes from a coal-fired power plant, from the air, or who knows where from? Who actually knew? So a big question, as big as the movie, Quo Vadis, is where do we go from here? How do we make that happen? Again, I cannot emphasize enough that this is a colossal effort that we have to undergo. We cannot make mistakes. We have no time for learning curves. This is unprecedented, even in the context of huge projects like the Manhattan Project or the Apollo program. So it really requires all of us as a community, as we've seen today, to join forces. And I want to also say, even though climate change is sort of the focus of today's meeting and how we deal with it, I haven't heard this afternoon that, I mean, of course it was implied, but we have a lot of carbon-based products that we cannot substitute. We have to have them made with carbon. We just have to be smarter where the carbon comes from and how it is being used. And in the IPCC reports, this quote actually is taken from there, says that while, of course, a lot of biogenic carbon could be used, we don't have enough land to produce it. So we need alternatives. And even though Andrea has pointed to us providing an update to this study that she has also quoted, that is still about 2 months away. But we are excited to soon talk about sort of what is, in our opinion, the market evolution for CO₂-based products. Because as you see this table here, the volume and the monetization value is enormous. And that's a key driver, right? So we're not talking about something that's kind of nice to do, but it doesn't move the needle. Well, it moves the needle in many different aspects. We've seen that table before, also taken from the IPCC report, highlighting that the projected CO₂ utilization potential for 2030, 8 years from now, is only in the low gigaton range. But given where it's now, which is more or less close to zero, that's enormous. 8 years is on the order of the time frame that it takes to bring a new technology from technology readiness to market deployment. We have a long way to go in only 8 years. And speed matters. Again, taken from the IPCC report, the longer we wait to get started, the harder it gets, and the less the actual impact will be. So it's really a call to action to everyone. And therefore, what do we need? Of course, coming from academia, the first thing we would say, research, right? Not enough, right? We need facilities, hubs. We've heard about all these things. We need the policies to support it. And let's not forget also the brain power, the workforce to actually make all of that go, right? This is a famous curve to illustrate the value of death. Right? One of my friends told me, if you folks in academia think you're ready, you're done with it, we don't even consider it ready for prime time in industry. How can we make sure that this gap is being filled? We can't leave it to the natural academic life cycle, right? That's about 3 to 4 times too long. So let's roll up our sleeves, all of us, starting from young kids to all of us active, and make this work. I want to keep it short so we can have time for discussion and questions. And I thank you all for being here. Give it back to Sydney.